Speaking of a dependency agenda, more and more local undertakings becoming dependent on the federal government. And again, conservative administrations are culpable in this. It was under the last Republican president that we passed a bill that further intruded the government into running our schools, oblivious of the fact that the American family is the smallest school, that the American family is the primary transmitter of values, and that schools serve families, not the other way around. The general problem, my friends, is not what Rahm Emanuel said, a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. The real problem is what Rahm Emanuel and others like him think, which is a crisis is a lovely thing to create. The crisis that is being created before our eyes is the crisis of the exploding deficit, which they hope will put us in a position to have, with spiraling deficits, a stampede toward an enlargement of the government, perhaps justified by this or that commission, who knows? That's the object. And of course, finally, to pick up on something Cleta mentioned, the greatest stampede of all that they had in mind was the stampede that would be brought about by stimulating a synthetic crisis with regard to the climate, which would be driven by our ultimate dependency on a supposedly unchallengeable clarity of scientists that would justify ever more serious government supervision of the most minute aspects of our life. Cleta and I were just talking about something. I want to do a poll here. I want a show of hands. How many of you honestly know that in 2014 we began outlawing the incandescent light bulb?
Yes.
Good for you. That's why you're here. The Will basement's full of incandescent light bulbs now. Well, what I'm telling you is not a sudden sunburst of mine. It was understood 150 years ago when Alexis de Tocqueville visited our country and decided that he could see over the horizon, unless we were careful, the soft despotism of which free countries could become susceptible. The soft despotism, he said, would become more extensive and milder, and it would degrade men without tormenting them. It is absolute, detailed, regular, far-seeing, and mild. It would resemble paternal power if, like that, it had for its object to prepare men for manhood. But on the contrary, it seeks only to keep them fixed irrevocably in childhood. It willingly works for their happiness, but it wants to be the unique agent and arbiter of that happiness. It provides for their security, foresees and secures their needs, facilitates their pleasures, conducts their principal affairs, directs their industry, regulates their estates, divides their inheritances. Can it not take away from them entirely the trouble of thinking and the pain of living? So, de Tocqueville went on, it is that every day it renders the employment of free will less useful and more rare. It confines the action of the will in a smaller space, and little by little, it steals the very use of free will from its citizens. It reduces each nation to being nothing more than a herd of timid and industrious animals, of which the government is the shepherd. Ladies and gentlemen, the stakes could not be higher. And that is why when we are told that it is time to transcend partisanship, it is actually time for us to say that partisanship is a good thing. We have two parties for a reason. We have different sensibilities, liberal and conservative. Let's argue, and may the best one win. Now we are plied and belabored with the idea that American gridlock is a terrible problem. Ladies and gentlemen, American gridlock is an American achievement. When the Founding Fathers went to Philadelphia in the summer of 1787, they did not go to create an efficient government. The idea would have horrified them. They wanted a safe government. to which end they created a government full of blocking mechanisms. 3 branches of government, 2 branches of the legislative branch, veto, overrides, judicial review, and yet I can think of nothing that the American people have wanted intensely and protractedly that they did not eventually get. We have far more to fear from swift than from torpid government. We have a great case to make because it was made by giants on whose shoulders we stand. It was made by the founders. Our job is to persuade the vast American middle, which is not angry. It is frightened, it is confused, it is puzzled. But Americans are not angry, and they do not respond well to angry people. They respond well to recourse to American principles. The reason Martin Luther King accomplished all that he did was not just that he said that racial segregation was wrong, but he said it was incompatible with American tenets. What we have to now do is have similar faith in the American people, and why not? As Winston Churchill, who loved our country as much as he loved his American mother, once said, the American people invariably do the right thing after they have exhausted all the alternatives. But I think the American people still understand that a benevolent government is not always a benefactor. They understand that capitalism doesn't just make us better off, it makes us better. They understand that when Jack Kennedy said, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country, one thing you can do for your country is to reserve a spacious portion of your life for which your country is not responsible. I think the American people still understand what Milton Friedman meant when he said, take any 3 letters from the alphabet, doesn't matter which ones, pick them at random. Put them in any order you want. You will have an acronym designating a federal agency we can do without. I think the American people still understand what Robert Frost meant when he said, I do not want to live in a homogenized society. I want the cream to rise. And most of all, they understand what Ronald Reagan meant when he said, I do not want to go back to the past. I want to go back to the past's way of facing the future. Ladies and gentlemen, in this room packed full of opinion, our government rests on opinion. Opinion is shiftable sand, as we have seen in the last 12 months. You in this room are what we call a shovel-ready group. So go out and shift some sand. Thank you very much.